Fae and demons have lived among us long before it was ever documented in history. While they lived dormant, there were always sightings of these monsters walking amongst us. Some were masters of blending in. Others walked with pride in the sun. Sometime in the 1800s, they emerged, tired of hiding in the shadows or being hunted for sport. While they wished for peace and many countries supported them, others were not too keen to share the world with them, particularly from the USA. Yet the president called upon the ambassador of monsters, asking for help in the Civil War. He agreed under one condition, that New York will become the home port to all monsters. And so it was granted in agreement with the president and the ambassador, beginning the wave of not only immigrants, but monsters of all kinds. With the ambassador, there were 4 rulers of each monster division: Grandeur, the king of terrain; Alberic, the avian prince; and Ruaidri, the lord of the sea. Amongst them was the 4th ruler and wife to Lord Ruaidri, the Fae Queen Tallulah. With her magic, she opened a portal for all Fae to travel through Staten Island. Together, they governed New York City, and it became the first city where monsters and humans coexisted. Their goal was to bring peace and balance amongst all. Yet, tragedy struck when the Fae Queen met a violent end, and the portal was shut forever. This also followed the disappearance of the Lord of the Sea, whom many began to spread rumors that he murdered his wife for political power. Nevertheless, it was a dark time for the Fae, and the ambassador took over Ruaidri's position in Brooklyn. He promised to find justice for the beloved queen, but the years that followed showed no progress. A great war struck, or World War I, as future historians labeled it, and the ambassador left across the world to aid, yet he had yet to return, and his predecessor took over. All in all, it was becoming bleak for the monsters as stricter laws were enacted, and violence was brewing even more. The Prohibition era, going from bad to worse for both monsters and humans. Some say the ban of alcohol was put into motion thanks to Christians, saying it was a drink that led to evil intentions. They went so far that it was all monsters doing for bringing in such an abominable liquid. Of course, this meant for many to get smart on how to smuggle it. Thus began the forming of gangs and speakeasies. The underground was the perfect place to fill in the gaps, and who better than the monsters themselves to provide the liquor? In return, all they wanted was compensation. It was even rumored that the Terrain King and Avian Prince led high crimes, but due to the Monster Civil Rights Act, no one could touch them, meaning they could get away with certain actions, and the police would turn a blind eye. It was in March 1928, where the turn of the tides took place in Brooklyn, when humans started to go missing. This is the story of how a mechanic and a singer turned the tides in New York's greatest mystery. Prologue: Hunting the Blue Eyes. Brooklyn PD had paperwork up to their necks and endless visits from concerned family and friends. There had been a total of 6 people that vanished without a trace, and there were no leads or reasons of motives. All the victims were random, no distinct patterns, and it was causing such a migraine for their lead detective. For nights, Clive Arwood would work without sleep, finding some connection or clue. His wrinkled clothes gave off a musky smell, and his unshaven face would beg to differ as a professional in the field. For hours he would stare at the clipped newspapers and photos. Were they involved with mafias? They caught smuggling? Were monsters involved? Nothing was connecting.
I'm telling you, babes, I was holding it for my cousin.
Arwood woke up from a start. Sleep caught up to him, and his alarm clock was the voice of an ingrate regular convict.
Save it for the judge, Bubblegum.
It's Buble Jung! Jesus, at least get my fucking name right!
Arwood peeked through his office blinds to watch the stout taxi driver being handled by 2 cops. Within a couple hours, he'll get bail by his girlfriend, to which the detective pitied her. How could she stay with such a troublemaker? Nevertheless, it wasn't his business to ask. He had more important issues to deal with. The case he was assigned to with no leads and cold trails. Something must be there. Something missed. He was lost in thought that he didn't hear a knock or his door open. His name was called out to break his concentration and was met with a stoic expression from the chief officer.
Arwood!
Ah! Jesus, Captain, I thought you were... What can I do for you, sir?
Come with me, Arwood. With how things are falling, it is no longer advisable to play lone wolf.
Oh, sir, I appreciate your concern, but aren't we short-staffed?
Don't pull that limp noodle excuse, Arwood. You know you can do better. Besides, I cannot be losing my best detective on the force.
Clive rubbed the back of his neck, trying to hide how that gave him a small bit of pride as he continued to follow. The captain lived up to being rough on his officers, even with the intention that he cared. Across the station, a young man sat on the bench, his knee bouncing up and down in nervousness. He didn't pretend to notice the curious and suspicious glances he was receiving. He knew it wasn't just because he knew none of the other officers, but also he was...
Officer Calhoun, come over.
Yes, sir.
It didn't take him but 2 long strides to stand before Captain Calder and another man who was craning his neck to face him. The first thing the detective observed was the peculiar color of the officer's eyes. As Captain Calder began to introduce him, he removed his hat to try and not appear as domineering, but that would always be an impossibility.
Detective Arwood, this is Officer Arthur Calhoun, our newest transfer. Sparkling record, but I'd rather see that in action, though I am not easily impressed.
Well, I'd rather prove my...
Yeah, Captain, I don't need to babysit some young buck fresh out of the academy. Not interested in whatever pet project you may have. Good day, gentlemen.
Clive!
Calder's voice didn't raise, but there was an edge before he stepped closer to the man, lowering his voice.
I understand your mistrust, but after a few of those late nights, I would hate having to put you on desk duty for a while. Besides, you both could share some war stories together. Calhoun here is hardly some young buck.
I asked to be transferred here since you all are right on the front lines of the war.
Fine.
With enough fidgeting with his cap, the young officer stuck out his hand.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you. I hope we can get along.
Arwood looked down at the hand and immediately turned his heel back into his office. Calhoun's shoulders deflated a bit. He had hoped that this police station would be different. He looked over at the captain, expecting something to reassure him. Yet the stoic chief gestured for Calhoun to follow his new partner. Guess there was no winning in this, as he sighed in defeat and pursued Arwood. He only hoped that the detective was not keen on shaking hands due to the rumors, not because he was of a different color. The detective sat back down in his chair that squeaked from old age and wear. He had nothing to offer for Calhoun, not even a seat. The officer had to stand awkwardly there while rubbing his neck.
You have a nice office. Definitely spacious. At least my head's not touching the ceiling.
Keep it down. I need to think.
And a drink.
My apologies.
He paused, looking down at his shine shoes. He lifted his foot up on newspaper clippings with pictures cut out.
Terror in Brooklyn. Disappearances increase in human citizens.
If you must know, I'm tracking whoever is pulling the strings. From turf wars to trafficking to smuggling booze and magic stones. And the biggest problem right now is human citizens disappearing. Someone is calling the shots.
I knew this was the trash.
What was that?
I was saying I can offer my assistance. There was a possible lead, but the location was partially unknown.
Wait, you have a lead?
That's why I'm here, detective. Maybe you can help me out.
Well, out with it! What do you have?
Calhoun scurried over, popping open the top button on his jacket and reached into it, pulling out a case file. He set it on Clive's desk and flipped it open. a photo of a young girl, and a wide shot of an everyday street.
Take a look at this. There is speculation of smuggling alcohol around this area, which has the highest volumes of missing persons. And she may be our best bet.
Where? Officer, this is nothing.
Arthur retained the desire to roll his eyes, but spotted a magnifying glass on the detective's desk, pulling it out and adjusting to where the girl was.
There. Marina Inuit.
Marina? Officer, you need a new prescription because that's clearly a boy.
I can assure you I don't. But there is connection to her.
He flipped to the beginning of the file, on an older woman that apparently hadn't had a good meal, and judging by her clothing, this was a blue blood in the drunk tank.
This is Susan Inuit, her mother. She was arrested a few years back for possession of opioid. She recently became part of the missing persons crisis we have on our hands.
So, one less of those puppy heads.
Sir?
Nothing. Keep going.
2 years ago, she came into a for adult child missing. However, the following day, when she was supposed to be picked up for her interrogation, she disappeared. It seems she heard about the raid that took place and fled. She must have counted on us searching her arrest history. We did attempt to search for her daughter beforehand, but to no avail. The last time Susan was under the radar, she had fled to Brooklyn and suddenly vanished without a trace.
Officer, get to the point.
Yes, sir.
He continues.
These two were connected because Marina here was seen at the location where Susan disappeared. I did research, and the word on the street was that the area has a hidden speakeasy somewhere close by.
Close by, you say?
That's why we need to find this woman.
He set the mugshot next to the evidence photo. Now Clive saw the connection. He looked closer, finally taking in the building behind her.
Strange. Why do those buildings look familiar?
Immediately, he slammed his shoes onto the hardwood before heading for the door, taking a hold of his fedora. He finally gave a clear view of his hand, but the officer didn't get a chance to glance.
Where are you going?
I happen to know where that picture was taken. I'm gonna go take a look.
Great, then I'll come with you.
You got a change of clothes?
No. Apologies, detective.
Tomorrow, bring different work clothes. For now, leave your coat and cap behind. If it weren't for the glasses, you're the furthest one would expect to be a flatfoot.
Calhoun, who was beginning to take off his coat, revealing the oversized button-up and large belt, awkwardly looking down at the detective's hand.
Now what?
Oh, nothing, sir.
Come on, we're taking the trolley. Get a move on or we'll lose it.
It was obvious to the detective that Calhoun caught a glimpse of the hand. It was marred and scarred by magic, and missing half a finger too.
So the rumors were true.
Taking the trolley downtown wouldn't get them far, so they had to walk by foot. If the detective didn't know where they were going, the street they had to find would have been a needle in a haystack. As they stood on the trolley, the silence was heavy between them. Arthur was warned about this before Captain Calder brought the detective over. He was the sort to always try and break the tension. Things were not the way they used to be. However, as he opened his mouth ready for something pleasant, Clive was pulling the string and the bell rang.
From here you can call me Clive or Arwood, not detective. If we just hand out that photo like the Force, our cover will be blown.
And you can refer to me as Arthur, sir.
Fine. Just stick close and follow my lead. Got it?
Right. Of course. So, how do you know about this place?
I know someone who may be able to give us a stronger lead. However, promise me one thing. Don't judge the guy working here.
Okay.
Well, this looks like a normal diner. It's the front of a speakeasy. Run by my brother.
The Maple Hole was a seedy little diner that could be mistaken as an abandoned hole in a wall corner. But just like a squirrel hiding their food for the winter, the Acorn Vault was in plain sight. It was indeed shady as hell, straight out of a picture show of a villain's hideout. But Clive walked towards it in stride. Yes, this wasn't his first rodeo.
Just follow my lead.
The new rookie kept up behind the detective, trying to stay close and make sure no one inside would give him dirty looks. A large, gruff-looking man stood as the bartender, serving the drinks to the customers. His hair was silver, and his facial features were large and squared, yet crooked with a nose that had clearly been broken in the past. In fact, his facial features were very similar to Clive. Family, perhaps? Well, he sure wasn't built the same. The bartender was rather bulk in the torso and arms. The man caught the eye of the detective and slid over to the end where the two were sitting.
Well, aren't you a sight for sore eyes?
Where Clive seemed to hide what part of the city he was from, Craig appeared proud, if this was any indicator.
Hello, Craig.
So, who's the beanpole?
Calhoun almost began to sweat bullets. He didn't want his superior to lie, especially not to family.
Oh, I'm...
Editor got tired of the shit photos I took. Better have a bird's eye view.
Oh yeah, it would be easier to get photos above crowds instead of through elbow holes. Though, wouldn't it be better if at least one of you actually got a decent amount of sleep?
Well, you know how it goes. The truth never sleeps.
Well, someone had to keep up with you sooner than later, Clive. Name's Craig, mister.
Arthur Calhoun.
Let me guess, your ma's the Statue of Liberty?
No, but believe me, you're not the first asked.
And with that, the tension was at least eased as Craig left and returned with 2 coffees, catching an annoyed huff from his brother. But even he tried to help with some issues.
So, what's the scoop? I mean, that's always the reason why you stop by.
Clive pulled out the photo, flipping it around, allowing it to dance across his fingers before setting it on the bar. Giving it a few light taps, he slid it towards Craig.
Ever see this face before?
Who's the Daisy?
They're actually a woman.
Oh, a real dame, huh? Nah, I don't know her.
Then, maybe you know her mother.
Clive slid a mugshot towards his brother. The woman glared intently as Craig studied it. That glare. Terrified, bright blue eyes flashed into his mind.
He knows.
Who wants to know?
Just a scoop, you know, laws and shit, won't give you details.
Craig seemed to be thinking hard before he turned to the few customers he had.
Everybody out! The Acorn Vault is closed! I ain't afraid to hose you out!
After waiting for the customers paying their tabs and finishing their drinks, Craig locked up.
Look, I don't want trouble, and I hate for this to be our last visit, brother. I don't want the wrong people hearing where you got your info.
Wait, did something bad happen to her?
Craig mumbled under his breath while he fidgeted with his ring as he joined them at their table.
2 fucking years. She didn't want to catch folks' eye, and whatever her old bag did to her, I wouldn't blame my gal. That's why I took her in, gave her a place to stay. Though, you can't hide that beauty. Guess she knew how to hide it better. Those eyes of hers were like magic. Always knowing where to go and what to find. She had skills as a runner to find that liquid gold, and it kept this place running smoothly. Hell, business was really booming here, and it was thanks to her. Though it did catch the wrong person's attention.
What do you mean?
Craig glanced over, pressing his scarred lips into a tight line. He blew a hard breath from his nose before reaching into his coat, pulling out a cigar and matches. He quickly dragged the matchstick across the tabletop to light the Cuban tobacco. Finally took that sweet, sweet puro inhale. After he seemed to become lost in his own mind, Arthur grew concerned that they had lost his attention before he released a large plume of smoke from his nose and mouth.
This bastard named Mochi, one of those damn fox tricksters. He and a bunch of goons stopped by here. You know I allow anyone to stop by. Money is money.
Oh, really? And how did that work for you?
If you want your scoop, don't go there, brother. The guy didn't like how I was running the place. Apparently his boss wanted me to have second best. Call it a jealous threat, but more importantly, he wanted me to squeal on who was retrieving the supplies. I could have backed off with the stuff, given it to him if he wanted, but I would never give my Spitfire away.
Spitfire?
Yours?
What the hell was that reaction?
No need to judge. She was my gal, emphasis on was. Smart as a whip, and ready to pick up anything to prove her worth, even if she didn't have to. Clever and charismatic? That was her? Anyone would have been drawn in. I tried to deny the fox, but...
The memory of that kitsune smashing his head into the bar top, which nearly triggered that phantom headache for him. He remembered staring into those icy orbs, piercing right into his tainted soul, instead of another's who healed him. He harshly took a shaky deep breath to clear his mouth and mind. One would say the man was trying to hold back tears, but Clive would neither confirm nor deny.
He wasn't asking. She sacrificed her freedom to save us, and they took her.
Do you know where they took her?
Who knows by now? But I do know who that creep is working for.
Who?
Who else?
Oh.
There was a moment of silence. Clive and Arthur felt that shiver. That only meant the new ruler of Brooklyn.
Though, good luck on that one. Ask one place and that bastard will sweep her away to the undergrounds.
The stress and worry for her brought him to take a long drawn-out drag from his cigar, a forlornness to it almost. Tobacco filled the air.
Try this cafe off of Goodwin Street. It's a co-ed for creatures and humans to hang out and get shit-faced. It's rumored to be the one place where he often visits.
And is it members only?
If you ask for the Emerald Lady, they'll let you in.
That will make things easier and cut down on time.
Clive stood up, holding out his hand for Craig to shake.
Thank you for answering our questions, Craig.
His brother looked up at him, shaking his head while setting his cigar into an ashtray, and quickly catching Clive off guard with his large arm encircling Clive's neck. The detective struggled, nearly unable to breathe.
Ha! Stop by more, wise head. You're always welcome, dear. You too, Artie.
Thank you. And it's Arthur.
What's the difference?
Craig, let go of me!
I think you're choking him.
When will you grow up?
You've got the maturity for the both of us.
The enforcers began to walk out before Craig called.
Hey, Calhoun, a minute with you.
Craig waved Clive on, and the detective shrugged before walking off.
Listen, I'm putting my trust in you to look after him. He doesn't have me as a bodyguard anymore, but the only reason he doesn't come here is because of my business.
Well, I'm sure he's just protecting you.
Just keep him from the bottle. Don't need him getting nailed, alright?
Arthur's jaw snapped shut before he gave a feeble nod. The law enforcement officials finally left the establishment. Craig watched them leave before glancing down towards his ashtray, though something else caused him to pause. Slowly, he peeled off one of his black gloves, staring sadly at the hook brand in the palm of his hand. The memory of that bastard digging his claw into his palm, it burning with that hot white blue flame. He didn't know what was worse, how slow he drew the hook deep into his flesh and muscle, or his Spitfire screaming, begging the fox to stop. His sadistic smile dragged him down into the darkness of the night, but it was her screams that always woke him up. Even her haunting memory was saving him from Mochi.
I'll leave it to you.
Going by one clue is a challenge. They had one name and there were multiple cafes on Goodwin Street. It was possible that the name Emerald Lady was an alias. She was possibly not a snitch in order to protect herself. The places turned them away for directions, until one was generous to point them where it was settled. Just like Craig's, it was disguised as a cozy cafe, and the only way to get in was to mention someone who works at it. The sign read Blessed Crown, swinging ominously despite the cute name. The waitress was cleaning up the place when the two entered.
Oh, sorry, gentlemen, we're closing.
Pardon me, miss. I was told to ask for the Emerald Lady.
Oh, were you referred?
They nodded in response.
Right this way.
The hostess guided them to the back of the restaurant and into a hidden dorm from plain view. The stairwell was dark and damp, only to be ignited by the silhouette light coming from the door.
Mind your step, gentlemen.
As they got closer, the faint sounds of trumpets and a piano playing a jazzy upbeat tune grew. The doorman greeted the waitress as she looked back at the two men.
Gentlemen, welcome to the Blind Crucible.
I quite a fashion, wear our hats and tights, play chess.
It was a co-ed speakeasy, including sleazy monsters and sleazy humans, cramped in a limestone cavern. There were hoots and hollers, as patrons shot the dice and played their cards under the streaming lights. Even worse amongst the crowd were corrupt cops fondling the demonic waitresses. It made Clive disgusted. But he had to keep his composure. That didn't keep Arthur from looking around warily. The smell of cheap cigars and booze was revolting, and the loud noises of laughter, fighting, and blaring music were no better.
Stay close, Calhoun.
I'm trying. It reeks in here.
The waitress led them to a rounded table.
Can I start you anything?
Scotch on rocks.
Right away.
He looked over at Calhoun, seeing the man was not going to drink. Looking towards the stage, a woman was singing loudly and possibly off tune with a few backing her up as a choir and band. She was heavy in makeup, and her blonde hair tied up in a bun. Of course, what caught his attention was the color of her gown and hat. Green. She must be the one. The Emerald Lady was the star of the show. Right on cue, the singer stepped off stage and the band continued on to the next set. The waitress caught the Emerald Lady's elbow, whispering into her ear while pointing at the pair. And the woman glanced towards them, a smile spraying across her face. The predator certainly wasn't subtle.
We got company.
Huh?
Arthur was having trouble staying focused. The woman in green sauntered over to the table, a plastered grin on her face.
Well, well, new faces I see.
Emerald Lady, I presume. You're as pretty as ever.
Please, call me Josephina. It's good to see newcomers. If you need any extra sugar, you know who to call. Mwah.
She was about to turn to leave for the stage, but Arthur stopped her.
Actually, we're friends with Marina. Is she here?
Clive tensed. Did this man seriously cut to the chase? Josephina seemed to almost look like she swallowed something rotten.
You're friends with the gopher?
She coyly leaned forward, running a finger under his chin. Though he was smiling, it was incredibly hard to hide the disgust creeping up from the overwhelming scent of cheap perfume and wine practically choking him.
Answer me this, darling. Wouldn't you like something sweeter instead of that drab and dullness she gives?
Tempting, but maybe another time?
He could tell that Arthur was about to lose his lunch.
Oh, you sure handsome?
Arthur thought. As the lady chuckled with his partner, Arthur took the time to glance around. Nothing but drunken slobs everywhere, be it a playing card game or flirting with a staff. It was sickening to him, and he wanted to leave as soon as possible. Then, the world seemed to slow down when he noticed someone standing out in a corner. A young woman dressed as a newsboy was talking to an orc waitress. She huffed a sigh and was about to turn the other way when her sapphire eyes met with his own. The world came to a stop.
Wait, that's...
All those smells and sounds that caused him such nausea became barely a whisper. Her eyes were swallowing him, but he wasn't drowning. Something deep was drawing him in. And what was only thin tendrils within his soul, lost during the war, was flexing and being pulled by her tether.
Is he looking at me?
Then it was broken as she looked away, her back colliding with a hunchback gargoyle.
Watch where you're going, bitch!
Sorry, Mr. Hubbard,
Get out of the way!
He didn't wait for her to finish, shoving her, his claws catching her shirt sleeve and ripping off her hat. Arthur stood up suddenly.
Arthur, what's gotten into...
The girl looked back in a silent plea, but then her eyes slid away, and her pupils dilated. Not at him, but at Clive. She ran, and Calhoun instinctively rushed to his feet, sending the diva crashing into the table.
Excuse me!
Arthur!
He ignored any cries of frustrations as he tried to catch up, the flexing getting stronger and allowing him to slip through the catacombs. But as he approached the cellar doors that bounced from gravity, he heard the echoes.
Drive, Jimmy, drive!
Wait, stop!
He burst through the cellar doors and was met with the automobile's exhaust. He violently coughed as tears brimmed on his eyelids. The car began to sped off. Unbeknownst to him, Clive was close behind, despite feeling weary of his age.
What the hell you went off for?
It's hurt!
The car had weaved into the streets. They were gonna lose them. Clive spotted some poor sap about to start his brand new Hudson.
Come on!
The gentleman was yanked out of his seat, cursing at the men who were allegedly stealing his car.
Move!
Clive showed his badge.
Shut it! Arthur, you're driving! What the fuck? Sorry?
Arthur winced from the young gentleman's angry rants as they floored it to catch up to the fleeing automobile. As they drove, Clive began to ready his gun.
Don't lose them!
Wait, you're not gonna shoot them, are you?
Clive leaned out of his window with his fedora off and aimed at the wheels. Whoever was the driver, they clearly knew how to maneuver. The first shot was at their bumper. Within the retreating vehicle, the redhead with glasses yelped.
Holy sassafras! They're not cooling off! What do we do?
Her knuckles were turning white on the steering wheel. She eyed the rearview mirror, making sure this jerk didn't hit them. A couple more shots were fired into the back, frightening the poor girl as her counterpart pulled out a pistol that was wedged in its seats. Her terror had immediately worn off as instinct and street discipline took over, pulling out the Colt 45, glancing to make sure the barrel was full. With a flip of her wrist, the barrel was spun into place. Ginny gave another yelp as she jerked the wheel, barely avoiding the next gunshot. In a quick motion, Marina pulled the hammer back and grabbed the door of the car and called back.
Just keep it steady!
Marina pulled herself out of the passenger window, holding the frame with her knees and hips as she angled her body to get a clear shot. Arthur jerked the wheel on instinct, the bullet going wide enough to hit the road and not the tire. But Clive was quick to respond with another shot. The figure quickly hugged to the side of the car, practically flattening themselves to the door. Another pop from the vehicle they were chasing, and both men jerked back as they heard glass shattering, and their left headlight was killed.
Christ, how are they doing that?
Can't you keep this jalopy straight?
I can't risk you getting hit.
Never mind me!
They needed that girl alive, but the driver was becoming a liability. He'll never hear the end of it from his captain, but these criminals were becoming a threat in the streets. He had to make this shot. He closed one eye and lined up his shot at the driver's seat. Ginny's scream caused everything to disappear in Marina's mind. As she spun around, she let another shot off and Arthur had to duck as the windshield was hit.
You alright?
Ginny was trembling, and tears were in the corner of her eyes, and pieces of the rearview mirror littered the front seat. Her only reply was the girl's whimper.
Just stay low!
She landed upon the floorboards and pushed herself to the driver's back door. She slammed her elbow against the wall of the chassis twice before a hidden component popped open.
Not on your fucking life.
This time, Marina slipped out the back left window. Using her body as a shield, she pulled herself up to her previous position. But higher as her feet pushed down, her knees now flushed to the inner wall. Meanwhile, Arthur had grabbed Clive's leg.
Get off of me!
Not even shooting for the driver.
Then what do I shoot?
The tires.
Marina, we're coming to an intersection.
Ginny called over her shoulder.
On my signal, take a right!
Suddenly, a loud typewriting clatter pierced through their conversation. Arthur jerked his partner in and they both ducked. Marina had assembled a Tommy gun, hitting everything to stall the chasers. She pulled back in to reload, but as she handled the ammo, a single bullet shone brighter, a golden sheen that she didn't bother to notice. She leaned out to fire. Everyone that was either walking or driving on the streets screamed in terror, and horns were blaring from every direction.
Now!
Marina aimed as Ginny swerved. She let fire, and the one golden bullet moved in like it had a mind of its own. It hit through the engine of the Hudson, but it didn't stop there. It curved, piercing through the metal and into the front right tire. The people on the street all screamed, running and diving out of the way of the Hudson as it lost control, spinning like a top through the intersection. Before another driver who couldn't stop in time slammed into the front bumper, sending the vehicle ricocheting across the intersection. The loud metallic twang echoed around the area with a softer, though not by much, crash of shattering glass as the Hudson crashed into a light bulb, bending and collapsing the side of the vehicle, pinning the car from flying even further. It took the men a few moments before Clive shook his head, stabilizing his vision, then kicking the windshield out. He rushed around, ignoring how his head and ribs were pounding, and attempted to get himself turned back to the escapees. But sadly, they were gone. The detective finally let loose weeks and months of frustrations as he screamed out in rage and began to kick in the destroyed vehicle. Arthur slowly lifted his head back up from the wheel as Italian explicitives erupted from his partner. He groaned, knowing he had a concussion and hopefully not a broken nose before dropping his head back into the wheel.
So much for my first day.